Hi class, this morning we're going to be talking about chapter 4 in your textbook, which is called the design argument. I'm not sure why he called it that, because typically it's called the teleological argument. I guess he didn't want to throw too much at you because the next chapter is ontological. The basic premise behind the teleological argument is not trying to prove God from the fact that for every effect there must have been a cause, and for each cause an effect, and in other words, working backwards until you came to the realization that something must have started the very beginning. That was the argument we looked at last week, the cosmological argument. Today, the design argument, or sometimes known as a teleological argument, tries to argue for the existence of God from two viewpoints. The first is the fact that there is purpose in this world. That by looking at the natural order of things, that we see that it must have been designed. For example, stones across a creek. They provide us footing that we might cross the creek. Mountains that can be climbed that have little cleft marks in it where you can put your hand and your feet. That there was purpose and that there was a reason that this was created. One, in other words, cannot simply look at creation and say, huh, there's no rhyme or reason to why this is. There's no rhyme or reason why cows go out to eat grass, or there's no rhyme or reason why when you put a seed in the ground that a big stalk of corn comes up, that in fact there was a purpose, and that purpose then proves the existence of God. This was first really put out by a guy named Paley, and you'll read about him in your chapter. But the other part of this design argument isn't just for purpose, but the other part talks about design as regularity. Now, what that means is that there are natural laws that simply occur. The scientists that study this world can look at gravity, for example. When I was a little kid, we had this game called Jarts. I don't know if any of you remember that. It's Jarts. And if you can imagine a regular dart that weighed about 5 pounds, and the idea was you played outside and you threw these jarts into a ring, a plastic ring that sat about 20 feet away. And if you got the jart in the ring, then you got so many points. Well, you know what? As little kids, what do little kids do? We throw jarts straight up in the air to see if they come back down. And lo and behold, if we would have let one of those 5-pound jarts hit us in the head, we probably would have been dead, and I wouldn't be talking to you right now. But the reality is that there are laws and principles and processes in place that prove that they cannot have simply occurred. Theory of relativity, the fact that gravity exists, the fact that scientific laws, both mathematical and physical laws, have been proven over and over again. And they've been proven to be consistent. So the argument is, look, if we have consistent laws, consistent rules that are always the case, then how can one not argue that an intelligent being created those? There can't be that consistency, just happenstance. Now, of course, there's this guy named David Hume, who you've already read about. He's all negative about everything. He always tries to find the loopholes in every argument. And as you go back, and he has 8 different arguments, and you'll read about those in your textbook. But interestingly enough, the author comes down, Davies tends to come down a little bit more on the teleological side. He admits Hume's has some good points, but this whole notion of what is now called creation science, as you know, for many schools have been struck down as being religious and not scientific. So they've called it creative intelligence, I think, and I'm not sure where the law actually stands. But the idea behind it is, look, if I, as a public school teacher, must or can teach something like evolution, which, by the way, if you ever read the book on evolution, is very flawed, and Darwin actually admits that there must have been a created being. If you really read that book, what Darwin talks about is, for example, formation changes. There was a study years ago where these particular moth hung around this um, factory that produced heavy smoke. And generation after generation, these moths who were white originally became black, not because of the soot that fell on them, but by natural instincts as they reproduced, this coloring became part of their coloring. So he was arguing that. That was one of his main arguments in the book. Yes, he does believe in evolution, but he also makes note that there is an intelligent being. So, back to the point. If I'm a public school teacher and I'm required to teach evolution, the point for the creation scientists or intelligent design or teleological argument, as far as I know, to date have been disallowed from teaching that aspect because the high courts have ruled that that is a religious aspect and not a scientific one. Now, this is a personal opinion. You may choose to disagree, and that's what's so fun about courses like this, because as you think through things, then you're going to see things a little bit differently. My point is, Darwinism is not scientific. My thought is, okay, if we somehow became who we are from frogs that crawled out of the ocean, I guess my question is, why are there still frogs? Or if we evolved from monkeys, why do we still have monkeys? Why didn't the entire breed transform? Why are there still gorillas and monkeys of all different kinds and shapes? Maybe that's too simplistic an argument, but Darwin's notion that we evolved from creatures that today still exist, to me, is a counter-argument for Darwinism. How can that be? How can a fish grow legs and become an iguana if we still have fish? Why don't all fish crawl up on the beaches and eventually grow legs and eventually become iguanas? I don't know. But as it stands right now, this teleological argument is forbidden in schools. And as far as I know, and if you know differently, please post that. But the latest update I saw, that was not allowed. So, unlike the cosmological argument that says there must have been an original cause in order for the world to exist, the teleological argument says, look, there has to be a God because there is purpose and there is regularity within the world as we know it. And that neither one of those, the processes nor the regularity, could have happened just by accident. That in fact, a God, an intelligent being, the Islamics would say Allah, the Jewish and the Christians would say God, created this for this very purpose. And I'll tell you what, if you ever go out and go someplace beautiful, you guys live in Oregon, but I've been to Seattle several times. If I go look at Mount Rainier, for me, I can't say that just kind of happened. When I went and saw the Rocky Mountains, I was at the Continental Divide and looked out. That can't just happen. You look at a sunset, and to me, that just can't happen. Sure, you can explain it through scientific laws, scientific premises, but what makes me as an adult, for example, shift in my mind when I hear a certain song? If I hear a sad song, I get sad. If I hear a happy song, I might get happy. If I hear a song that I hadn't heard for 30 years, it'll immediately take me back 30 years ago. Or if I smell a certain smell, um, like growing up, my mom used to fix me spaghetti. That was like my favorite dinner. So she would cook it all day. She'd, make the sauce and the meatballs and all that stuff. And all day it would be sitting there and you'd smell it through the house. My mom is now in a position where she's in a assisted living facility with Alzheimer's. So she's not going to cook spaghetti for me anymore. But if I were to smell that smell again, it would take me back. So the processes and the regularity of life point to a creator or a creative intelligence that must exist. That's the crux of the teleological argument. I'm going to post some other interesting YouTube videos that talk about this I think you'll find interesting. And then next time we're going to talk about the ontological argument, which is a completely different viewpoint altogether. Thanks a lot.